is to start by saying something to yourself like, you ask yourself a question. If I weren't defensive right now and I were really curious, what question might I ask the other person? And somehow that tends to move people out of being defensive, and then it's much easier to think of a question or a statement. The other thing is to acknowledge your own defensiveness. I think I'm getting a little bit defensive, and I just want to stop a minute because I want to have this conversation in a way that I feel good about it. We don't have to be so heavy about our defenses. We can just do it that way. So those are a couple of tips for moving yourself out. And then the other thing I can do is I can summarize how to shift with regard to the three basic forms of communication. And the first one is questions. And typically when we ask questions in the old model, the defensive model, we often have an agenda. We ask the question in a tone coming up at the end of the tone. So I may say, what made you decide to do it that way? And you notice I'm sort of frowning and shaking my head. I call it the defensive shimmy. And so even if I'm asking a very gentle question, supposedly like, oh, are you upset about something? People tend to shake their head and frown, and we don't look very friendly. So it can prompt other people's defenses almost instantly, even when we're being sincere. So when we ask the question, I want to relax my face. I want to ask the question coming down in tone, and instead of saying, what made you decide to do it that way, which can sound judgmental and critical, I want to say, what made you decide to do it that way? I come down, I'm relaxed, and people say it changes the whole internal feeling they have to safety and they want to open up. So when I ask a question, my intention, non-defensively, is never to try to control the answer or lead the person. I have a relaxed face, my body tone comes down, my voice comes down at the end of the question instead of up, and then I simply ask in a straightforward way about what I'm curious about. In my book, I outline about a dozen ways that we can ask questions that get at the heart of an issue, but the key thing is, at this moment, to talk about having the intention not of controlling the other person in any way or leading the answer, to have a voice tone that comes down at the end, and third, to have a relaxed facial expression instead of lots of frowns and shrugs and things like that. When we shift with the statement, typically we tend to try to convince other people to agree with us. We say yes, but we do like your dad and jump in, with our own opinion before someone is finished. In a non-defensive model, what I want to do is I want to tell you what I hear you saying, anything I see that contradicts it. You might be saying, I'm not angry and looking really angry, so I would say, I hear you saying that you're in a pretty good mood and I see you raising your voice and rolling your eyes or frowning. Then we tell the person our conclusion. So it seems to me you are upset about something but you don't want to talk about it. Then I can tell you my feelings. It's hard for me not to know. I would love it if you want to tell me, and I don't want to try and force you to do it. So I'm telling you what I hear, what I see that contradicts it, which could be voice tone, past experience, outside data. I tell you my conclusion about what I think that contradiction means, and then I tell you what my own reaction is. A very easy way to remember that is to tell the person what you hear them saying with their words, and then what's wrong with this picture? What doesn't feel quite right? And that's the contradiction. And then what do I think is really going on? That's my conclusion about what the contradiction means. And then the fourth piece is to tell you my own thoughts and my own reactions. So by the time I tell you my reactions, you understand how I got there and you're less likely to feel judged and more likely to hear me. And the final one is the prediction. And when we give a prediction defensively or non-defensively, the phrasing is often very much the same. But in defensive, you're threatening. If you don't get dressed, then you can't watch TV, and my agenda is to get you to get dressed. If I'm giving a non-defensive prediction, it's much more relaxed, and I'm saying, if you don't get dressed, then I'm not willing to have you turn on the TV, and if you get dressed, then you can watch the TV as soon as you're dressed. And I don't try to control the choice, so I don't get that defensive resistance from the other person because they're not feeling like I want to control them. So essentially, that's the difference between all three forms of communication, and some tips on how to shift from being defensive to being non-defensive.
Sharon, this has just been such a delight, and what great education to get out to our viewers. So in our final closing, is there any fabulous words of wisdom that you'd like to give to our viewers? Any points?
I think that we have a tendency to want to try something new, to want to learn new ways to communicate. And then not only do we get caught up in our old habits, but we try something new, and then if it doesn't go exactly the way we wanted it to go, we start to say, well, I tried it and it didn't work. And I think that's the death knell for really learning these new skills. I mean, I can just about guarantee you from the bottom of my heart that being non-defensive has a kind of power that we can never equal when we're defensive. And at the same time, if we give up, if we try it, it doesn't quite work the way we want it to, and we give up, then we're never going to get there. And that's true sometimes even for me. I have been in situations, for example, with my own daughter, who is now 29 years old, or was 29 years old at the time this story happened. And she was raised by two parents who were both therapists, so what better way to impact us when she was a kid than to say, I don't want to talk about it. And so as an adult, sometimes we would be getting along and we're very close, but then all of a sudden I would end up having the feeling that something was wrong and she was upset with me, but I'm the mom, so I don't really quite know what sort of impact I had. So I would say to her, honey, is something the matter? And she'd say, no, I don't want to talk about it. Well, now there's a great contradiction. Nothing's the matter, I don't want to talk about it. So I would try to say to her then, well, why don't we try to talk about it? Maybe we can resolve it. Now, if you can tell just from the interview so far, I'm still trying to convince her a little bit. I still have a little bit of an agenda. Even though I'm being loving and gentle, I'm trying to say, well, let's talk about it. I'm trying to get her to do it. And that's all it takes to cause the resistance. Well, one time, for a reason I don't understand, I actually asked her a different kind of truly non-defensive question. And I said, Amy, what is it that would make you prefer to not talk about it rather than to talk about it and try to resolve it? And she said, well, Mom, one thing would lead to another and it would get too big. And again, instead of trying to convince her, I just said, would you like to try or would you rather not? And the next thing I knew, my 29-year-old daughter was lying with her head in my lap, crying her heart out and telling me the kinds of things that most of us at some time in our lives need to tell our parents. Now, I could have just said, well, it doesn't work with Amy. And yet, after all those years, when she was 29, I was able to ask that question for the first time in a way that she was able to truly respond. I think we are so used to being able to damage a relationship with just a sentence or two. We are not used to the idea that we have tremendous power, even greater power, to bring healing so simply and with such a simple question or such a simple comment.
Well, Sharon, I'm afraid we've run out of time. And it's been such a delight. I want to thank you so much for coming.
I've loved the interview with you.
Oh,
thank you so much.
Okay. I hope we have provided you more information to benefit you and your loved ones. And look forward to viewing my other knowledgeful wellness shows. And until next time, stay well and goodbye. Thank you again, Sharon.
You're so welcome. It's been wonderful.
Thank you.